Hello, I'm Charles Hubble, your host and narrator for our podcast series, Deceived, the Moo Years. Deceived, the Moo Years is the true story of one young man's compelling, at times terrifying, former involvement with the martial arts cult Chung Moo Quan.
The following story you are about to hear is true. It took place between 1980 and 1996. Most of the names have been changed. There are other versions of the story. My name is Russell Johnson, and this one is mine.
Deceived, the Moo Years, Episode 3+1. There are many reasons for joining a martial arts school. For many, it's the idea that martial art training builds confidence. In fact, certain studies have shown that children who participate in martial arts do better in school. Now, let's say you're shopping around for a good martial arts school and go into your local dojo in a strip mall to inquire about lessons. Upon meeting the instructor, he tells you the school will not only teach you martial arts, but also they will instill within you irrational fears, phobias, and superstitions. And for a little extra money, they would throw in some rituals. He tells you by the time you reached black belt in their system, your head will be full of all kinds of weird shit. Would you run the other way?
The schools say that by developing a strong mind and body, you not only learn self-defense, but also learn to understand yourself and find true happiness. A school brochure says Chung Moo Quan is an investment in life.
One of the very first phobias Russell remembers being taught was the fear of the number 4, which in the Moo was considered to be unlucky. You could never say 4 out loud. It was always 3+1. Tetraphobia, the fear of the number 4, is a superstition found most often in East Asian areas like China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. The Chinese word for 4 sounds very similar to the word for death. There was no kata number 4. 13 was also considered an unlucky number, though not as unlucky as the number 4. When you entered a room, you always entered with your right foot first to show that you were stepping into the room with the right mindset. As Russell advanced in his training, more rituals would be added.
When I joined the Moo, there was no list telling me all the weird shit that was a part of their agenda. Instead, it was a slow process, and the longer that I was in school, the more shit that would be added. The number 4 was a phobia that really stuck with you. You encounter 4 every day. I would never use gas pump number 4 in fear that my car would break down. My mind was being programmed to think stupid shit like that.
Food ritual. In many religions and destructive cults, food rituals are not uncommon. In the Buddhist religion, it's the offering alms to monks. Within Zen Buddhism, a common ritual is to offer food from your plate to ghosts and spirits, including those of the deceased ancestors. Christians abstain from meat on Friday as a kind of sacrifice and reminder that acknowledge Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, which is commemorated on Good Friday. When you join a martial arts school, the last thing you might expect is to be taught to follow a food ritual. When Russell was training under Aiden, he came into the school and it was Aiden's birthday, just 2 days after Russell's. Russell remembered feeling special that his birthday was so close to someone he held in such high regard. There was a cake at the school. Once it was cut, Aiden took a small piece and threw it out the door without saying why. Then Aiden would get the next piece of cake. No one would eat before Aiden. In the Moo, no one ate before their higher belt, unless otherwise directed. One story for waiting for higher belts to eat first was that hundreds of years ago, higher belts who trained in Chung Moo Quan developed a stronger internal stomach constitution through the practice of Chung Moo Quan form. They were not affected by tainted or poisoned food. Chung Moo Quan claimed that it was responsible for the protection of the royal Asian family and would eat the food before it was served to the royal family, assuring that it was not bad or poisoned. But in reality, the waiting for a higher belt to eat first was to be submissive, to obey or yield to his authority. He was the alpha dog. There were various stories about the casting out of food. One story, from the book Herding the Moo, was that food was tossed out to satisfy any ghost or evil spirits in the area. It was similar to the Zen Buddhism ritual, but with more emphasis to appeasing evil spirits. Russell speculated that it was a way of giving back to nature, completing the circle of life, or remembering Master Kim. The food ritual was always followed. When eating out in a large group, they waited for the highest belt's food to be served to him, and for him to perform the food ritual before eating. The food ritual was never really explained. Members of the Moo would follow this ritual, not knowing why.
We were all doing and believing in things in which we did not understand. And as the song goes, we suffered. Superstition ain't the way.
Broken mirrors. Russell was training under Aiden when, practicing a reverse kick, he knocked the kicking target pad from the holding student's hand and broke a mirror. With the school's superstitious nature, the mirror had to be dealt with right away. Aiden immediately sent Russell to Walmart in uniform to pick up another mirror. Russell was unaware the school had a method of dealing with broken mirrors, or what they believed happened if you broke one inside the school. In his book, Herding the Moo, author Joe Smith describes the Moo method for handling broken mirrors. What to do when you break a mirror, from the book Herding the Moo. If you break a mirror, you have to wipe dog manure on the broken edges, and then throw the treated pieces over your left shoulder into a moving body of water. This sacrament in Moo prevents the bad thing that was set to occur from actually happening. This was a documented Moo belief to be taken seriously. The way it's described is that mirrors are a gateway to different realms or dimensions, that it's possible for something powerful and not good to enter this world through a broken mirror, that animals such as dogs will howl or act strangely afraid if a broken mirror is close by. Breaking a mirror in school was absolutely the worst. It had to be replaced that night. Many schools had spare mirrors just in case. A mirror broken in the home or car also had to be handled as soon as possible. It was ordinary conversation to ask amongst your peers about neighborhood canines, and of course you knew where one good-sized pooch liked to hang out as a backup. Advancements in technique brought about kits and boxes in car trunks containing all necessary tools like precious paper towels, rags, and soap for cleaning up enough to get home. A criteria to scouting a new place to live was pre-establishing the location of a creek or stream. The water had to be moving. Not sure why, but it had to be real important. We heard of at least one unfortunate soul, for lack of a better word, who had to retrieve his previous night's work and start over. It was stressed to be sure all the edge was covered with ample bongu, in other words, shit. It was paramount lest you didn't handle correctly, and whatever bad thing was going to happen happened due to your failure to properly wipe. In Moo terminology, il don, to move as one mind, was our mantra. Master Kim was quite skillful at twisting biblical passages to entrap people to worship him. After a time, some developed an innate skill in the practice of handling broken mirrors, and were sought after for their quick and correct handling should the need ever arise. Handshake. The school's unusual handshaking ritual required a very limp-wristed, weak shake, like shaking hands with a towel. Russell was told never to shake a higher belt's hand hard due to iron palm training. You might not know if their hands are sore. While Russell was training, he practiced several techniques to strengthen his hands. The first was Jijong, in which there was a short wood table covered in duct tape and newspapers. Students knelt, striking it hard using the palm of their hands. The second was called Chung Quan Dolya, which was a 4x4 wood block with very little leather padding. Russell practiced hitting it with his two front knuckles, breaking the bone and sometimes the skin. Within 24 hours, new calcium deposits would set up and knuckles would become bigger, similar to the size of a ball-peen hammer. It was not unusual to have or see others with cut and bloody knuckles. The third was Kung Su. There you hit the side of your hand like a knife on the Chung Quan dolya. These were the beginning stages of iron palm training. Higher belts had even more advanced training. Russell remembers national instructor Jordan demonstrating an open-hand palm strike on his chest one day. When Jordan got in on Russell, the strike left not only a hand imprint on Russell's chest, but also the fingerprints. Iron palm training was considered important because it supposedly saved Master Kim's life during the Korean War. Captured at gunpoint by North Korean soldiers and forced to march, Master Kim escaped by back-knuckling the men through their helmets and crushing their skulls. At school events, outsiders were thrown off by alpha male martial arts instructors giving limp-wristed handshakes. In Russell's family, he was taught to look a person in the eyes and give a firm handshake. He tried shaking his uncle's hand the school way, and it was unacceptable. Russell tried to explain the reason behind it, but his uncle would have no part of the explanation. Pine Solly. There were many stories about Master Kim that Russell would question, but the longer he was in school, the more his critical thinking became impaired. For example, Master Kim couldn't read English when he first arrived in the U.S. One day when he was thirsty, Master mistakenly drank Pine Sol, thinking it was juice. For 2 weeks, he would send an instructor to the store each day to get him a bottle of what he called Pine Solly. After 2 weeks, he developed a bit of a stomachache. The story was told as a way of showing the strength of Master's internal constitution. When Russell first heard this story, a little voice in his head whispered, "How could Master not know from the smell or the taste that it was a cleaning agent?"
I heard the Pine Sully story from more than one instructor. Even as a teenager, it was hard to swallow.
There was always a voice in the back of his head questioning everything that he heard, but he had somehow become numb to it. Russell was surrounded by people older than him, telling him it was possible. He believed that the instructors telling these stories also believed them. Red shoes. During training, instructors told one unbelievable story after another about Master Kim. One was that Master Kim could run from Minneapolis to Duluth in 45 minutes. Normal travel time by car is 2 hours and 26 minutes at about 63 miles per hour, with a total traveling distance of 155 miles. Master Kim would be running at a speed of 206 miles per hour. There was another story that Master Kim could run on water, and that he demonstrated this by running across a pool. In the back of his head, Russell knew these stories were impossible, but he nodded his head with everyone else, indicating that he believed every word.
It's weird, the process that takes you from being a rational person who knows that these things are impossible to a person whose critical thinking skills have been almost drunkenly impaired.
Black Belt course. In March 1985, Matt Kemps called Russell into the office and told him he was being considered for the Black Belt course. Matt began to make a speech like Aiden had, saying not everyone is accepted into the Black Belt course, that students had to be recommended. Matt emphasized how much money the course required. He gave Russell a piece of paper and asked him to write down his monthly living expenses to figure out what kind of monthly payment he could afford. The day came for Russell to be accepted into the Black Belt course. Regional head instructor Jared Jacobson stepped into the school. Russell was called into the office along with Matt Kemps, Mason Holmes, and Keith Brown. Jared asked why Russell was being recommended for the Black Belt course, and each instructor gave reasons why he should be accepted. Russell was asked why he should be accepted. He spoke of his desire to reach Black Belt, that he wanted to develop himself both mentally and physically, and his desire to help others achieve this goal as well. Next, Russell was asked, how much was he able to bring down? He responded by saying, "Be all right to say $5. He handed a plain white envelope containing 5 crisp $100 bills, the down payment for the $9,000 black belt course.
Handing over the crisp $100 bills in a plain white envelope was done in a ceremonial and servitude way, making sure to hand the envelope to the higher belt with 2 hands and never handing it over the corner of a desk. Handing it over the corner was considered unlucky.
Russell was unaware of all the additional courses above the black belt. He again signed a contract, this time for the black belt course, but was not given a copy of it. He did not ask for one, fearing it would be a sign of disrespect that he did not trust the school.
A student at this school near Boston says he was hurt when he quit. In a lawsuit, the student charges that the instructor grabbed him around his windpipe and said, "How would you like to die right now?" The school denies that anyone was assaulted.
In Pam Zeckman's 1989 expose, Chung Moo Quan, The Cult and the Con, she reported that a former student, Will Smith Vanis, filed a lawsuit against the Moo School in the Boston area. The complaint stated that on or about September 22, 1988, after Will Smith Vanis requested a copy of his membership contract, an instructor grabbed him very hard around his windpipe and said, "How would you like to die right now?" The instructor stated to Smith Vanis, "You signed a contract which said you cannot sue." As a result of the instructor's assault, Will Smith Vanis sustained an injury to his neck.
Chung Moo Quan students say they did not get copies of their contracts and were told it's disrespectful to ask for them.
I said, "May I please have a copy of that?" "Well, what's the matter? Don't you trust us?" And far be it for me to tell somebody who can terminate my life in 2 seconds, you know I don't trust you.
The assault of students in the process of signing and requesting copies of contracts was not an isolated incident. In 1991, affidavits were filed with the Illinois Attorney General's office in support of its amended consumer lawsuit against the Moo for deceptive trade practices. At least a dozen affidavits were filed under the alias of John Doe, due to fear of a violent reprisal. Here are a few excerpts from those affidavits. John Doe number 1. After I refused to enroll in the instructor's course, one instructor slapped me in the face. While I was a student, I witnessed another student who refused to sign an additional contract knocked unconscious and bleeding from the nose and mouth. I am afraid of the possible acts of those currently involved in the Chung Moo Quan organization. John Doe number 2. I was a student of the John C. Kim Stiles School of Chung Moo Quan in Texas. I stopped attending in 1991. I received threats to my physical well-being after leaving said school. John Doe number 3. After requesting a copy of my contract, one of the instructors hit me several times in the chest. John Doe number 9. I was a student of the John C. Kim Stiles School of Chung Moo Quan at Villa Park. In early 1990, at a group lesson, an instructor warned me that if I quit Chung Moo Quan, I would instantly have 6 million enemies and that I might not wake up in the morning. After Russell signed the contract, he and the instructors entered the practice area, and the students were ordered to line up. Regional instructor Jared announced that Russell had been accepted into the black belt course. He had tried hard and earned the opportunity for black belt training. The students were told to shake Russell's hand and congratulate him. Having students congratulate Russell was another manipulation to get those students not in the black belt course thinking about it. Unknown to Russell at the time, the whole recommendation process was an orchestrated ploy to get him to sign up for the black belt course and to get more money out of him with additional courses. They used his desire to become an instructor and his fear of not being accepted into the black belt course against him. In reality, the biggest qualification for acceptance into the black belt course was the ability to pay.
I would later be taught that the whole black belt course recommendation process was a complete scam. It was an ends justifies the means to get the student into the black belt course.
Once Russell got into the black belt course, He was pressured to have more than one job in order to pay off his contract faster. He worked the second shift at Shamrock Industries from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. After leaving work at Shamrock, he'd go to a second job at a bowling alley from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. He'd get home to sleep a few hours, then back to School C for training. If the instructors were aware that Russell had very little sleep, they seemed to take it just a little easier on him. Russell would later quit his job and get another as a Pinkerton security guard with James Holt. Several school instructors had been employed by Pinkerton at one point or another, including Aiden. Having multiple jobs would become ingrained in Russell. Years later, he would add up all the places he worked. He could remember working 37 separate jobs. Sleep deprivation is common in many destructive cults and in the Moo. Anyone who has ever experienced several sleepless nights or has had to stay up all night to work or study will remember the difficulty of functioning normally. Many cult groups make sure that members have only 3 to 5 hours sleep each night. It's not that the Moo had a policy to that effect. Most cults don't. They merely make sure that the person is so overworked as to have little time to sleep. They would praise assistants and instructors who slept very little and belittle those who were sleeping too much. In time, members learned to sleep a minimum amount. Murphy, Gilman, and Russell. One night, shortly after being accepted into the Black Belt course, Russell was at a local bar where he ran into an old high school friend, Murphy Gilman. To Russell's surprise, Murphy was also training in Chung Moo Quan and also had his third section belt. The two had first met in the 7th grade at Olson Junior High School in 1978. Russell was 14 at the time. A local professional wrestler, Jesse Ventura from AWA American Wrestling Association, had opened a gym near Russell's home, and he started to train there. Russell was strong and could squat nearly 350 pounds on his height of 5'6". He was a year older than most of his classmates, having been held back in the 5th grade after missing too much school as a victim of constant bullying, fighting, and school suspensions. Murphy was one of the smallest kids in the 7th grade, so light that Russell could pick him up and place him on top of the lockers when the two were horsing around in the halls. In Russell's first year at Olson, during a math class, the teacher surprised Russell, hitting him hard on the shoulder from behind. Unaware that it was a teacher, Russell reacted instinctively. Russell turned around swinging, knocking the 350-pound teacher out cold. With his teacher laid out in front of him, Russell was in shock. The whole incident had occurred so fast. Russell ran to the principal's office, hyperventilating, and reported what happened. The school first considered expulsion, but after Russell's mother vigorously defended him and the threat of a lawsuit for the teacher assaulting a student with epilepsy, the incident resulted in Russell being suspended for 1 week for hitting a teacher. The teacher received 1 week off for hitting a student. After that, most kids in school pretty much left Russell alone. There were rumors about fights he was in, some true and others exaggerated. But for the first time in his life, he was being left alone. For most of Russell's life, he suffered from grand mal seizures. In addition, he had rage seizures. Being attacked and bullied could set him off into a violent fit of rage. At age 12, his siblings introduced Russell to smoking pot, which had an instant calming effect on his rage and his epilepsy.
Having seizures in public was the worst. I could be going down a flight of stairs and have one. A crowd of people would gather around and start trying to shove things in my mouth because they thought that I would bite my tongue off. I would end up in an ambulance, and the next day, going back to school, I would be subjected to stares and pointing and cruelty from other kids. Epilepsy sucks.
Despite his knocking out the teacher, this was a comparatively less violent time in his life. If Russell was walking down the hall and saw someone being bullied, he would step in to defend them. This would happen several times during his 2 years at Olson Junior High. Russell took it upon himself to spare other kids from the bullying that he had experienced.
It bothered me when I was going to school and I saw someone being bullied. By this time in my life, I had been exposed to excessive amounts of violence, and sparing others from that was something I felt I could do. I felt like a dog that had been beaten too much. It was hard to even be touched.
One day, Russell stepped out of class to use the boys' room. There, he found Murphy surrounded by several threatening kids. Murphy recalled the incident in an email to Russell some 30 years later. It was 1978, and I had to go to the restroom during class and went to the second-floor bathroom, which was off-limits. There were racial tensions toward the end of the year, and the black kids were trying to claim that bathroom as their own. Because it was between classes, I didn't think twice about going to the second-floor restroom. But when I entered, I found a bunch of kids who were skipping class and hanging out in their bathroom. Even though I was one of the smallest kids in the school, I still decided to take my chances and use the facility, which wasn't well received. I did my business, but they blocked me when I tried to leave. They threatened to throw the little honky out the window, then debated whether they should give me a swirly first, then throw me out the window. I think they were serious. They were busy arguing over what they should do next when in walked Russell Johnson. What your wife probably would have trouble believing is that in Olson Junior High, you were more feared than Tony Soprano. Nelson on The Simpsons is probably the best comparison, except a cartoon character can't do justice to the fear you instilled. Your reputation was well earned, and every kid in the school, even the 8th graders, knew better than to cross you. Anyway, I guess you didn't really care that they had staked claim to the second-floor bathroom. As soon as you walked in, you quickly sized up the situation. It was 6 of them versus 1 of me, and they had bad intentions. One of the kids tried to greet you cordially, but you looked at me and said something like, "Hey Murphy, how's it going? Did you already take a piss?" I muttered something like, "Yes, but now I am trying to leave." Their eyes were as big as saucers, and one of the kids fired back fearfully that everything was cool and I could leave now. You glanced at the kid and sarcastically asked him, "Oh, you were having a problem with Murphy?" All of them started their pleas that it was all a misunderstanding, but you were having no part of their nonsense. You told me to go back into the other room of the bathroom for a second. All I heard next was things like, "No, man, leave me alone. You're going to kill him. Ow, 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 ow," etc., and something hitting the wall. After you were done with them, you came in the other room to take a leak. You just kind of chuckled and laughed about how you thought it was funny that the kids were screaming. I left and went back to class, and no one had to worry about using the second-floor restroom at Olson Junior High ever again. Now Murphy was going to law school in St. Paul and started training at School B there. They instantly reconnected and started to hang out. Since they were not training at the same school, they would get together at night and have a few beers. Russell was very serious about reaching black belt, but he didn't think Murphy was really looking to make training his career. Neither knew who was higher in rank at the time, but both presumed it was Russell. In high school, Murphy was on several sports teams and a competitive guy by nature. The more he and Russell hung out, the more seriously Murphy trained. They often went to clubs and bars at night and hung together during Moo School gatherings. Within a few months, Russell would find himself living with other students from School C, and Murphy would move in with students from St. Paul's School B. These two could never have imagined in junior high school just how intricately entwined their lives would become over the next 18 years.
I've always heard that things happen for a reason. I think that the events of my childhood prepared me for my fight against the Moo in the future. Nothing they could do to me could compare to what I had already been through. A bond was created the day I stood up for Murphy, one that years later, not even the Moo could break. Next week on Deceive, the Moo Years. Confessions, punishment, and sacrifice in the Moo. Deceive the Moo Years is a production of Deja Moo, LLC. Recorded and produced by Alive and Social Podcast Network. Russell Johnson, producer and writer. Charles Hubble, host and narrator. David Bruskin, editor. Russ Meyer, co-writer and editor. Aaron Tro, sound producer. Brian Price, audio editor. Wyatt Sarber, sound engineering. Woon Tae Ryu is our advisor in South Korea. Authentic is our advertising representative. Deceive the Moo Years is represented by Young Entertainment Law. The Deceived production crew would like to thank Joe Smith, author of Herding the Moo. Herding the Moo is available on Amazon.com.